This framework to help as a way to organize your thoughts. So we've sort of broken it into three parts for this. The first one is really to think about what approaches your design will embody. So these might be sort of underlying themes, things like perhaps creativity, collaboration, hands-on learning, student choice and agency. What are the underlying approaches or strategies that you're using in your design? So think a bit about that. Perhaps they're already at the top of your mind, or perhaps you bake them into your thinking but didn't really articulate them. But it's useful even within your group to really bring those out and sort of clarify them. What are really underlying your approaches? The second piece of thinking through your designs is really focusing on sort of the nuts and bolts of your design, sort of beginning to flesh out what is the thing you're making, what's it going to look like, how is it going to, how are the things that I'm making looking, and breaking those core components really into different parts might also be helpful to think about. Of course, we do this as educators all the time. So you might be thinking about things like the tools. What is the tools that are part of your design? Are there software? Are there certain specific programs you're using? Are there physical materials, manipulatives, cubes, posters, paper, markers? What are you using as part of your activity that you're designing? And I don't mean necessarily the prototyping now. I mean, what are you actually thinking about for your proposed solution to the problem? What are the instructions that you are going to be giving participants when they're using your proposed solution? Are there prompts? How do students or participants know what to do? What are other people or facilitators doing? Are there other people in the room during remote learning? Maybe there are parents or siblings. Are they part of the part of your design? It might be interesting to just sort of think about that. And the tasks, this is what I think we come to usually first when we think of our designs, but I put it third here deliberately because these other pieces are critical to think about as well. But what are the activities that are happening? What are students or participants being asked to do? And other things, what's the context in which the proposed design is taking place? Is it synchronous, asynchronous, remote, in the classroom? Is it a noisy space? Will people be able to pay attention? What are the tasks and what's the context that's taking place in? Third, you're going to be thinking about what this looks like in action. So thinking about the context sort of bridges into this, but this is really a little bit different. This is taking a moment and visualizing as clearly as you can in your mind what your designed proposed solution will look like when it's working well. So what would you be able to observe if you were watching, this taking place that would tell you that it's working? So this might be actual things you can really observe and look at. Things like, I'm watching the students interacting, I'm listening to what they're saying. Perhaps you're looking at student work and you can say, okay, they're using this tool, they're producing this piece of writing, all of those things. What is it that is in action that would tell you that it's working? In other words, what data will you collect if you were to watch this in action? So going back to sort of framing this as sort of experimentation, when we move to the prototype, we'll sort of think a bit even more about that. But thinking overall right now about these three areas of your proposed design, again, you don't have to worry about jotting this down. It's all on a worksheet that's uploaded to the TISSx website. So once you have that arc of your design, you've thought about your intent, you've thought about what the proposed solution will look like, and you've imagined what it looks like in success, you're ready to sort of begin that prototyping process, right? You're ready to sort of get that feedback. You have some vision of at least parts of it, and you don't have to have a perfect vision of everything. You want it as concretely as possible, but that doesn't mean you have to have it complete, right? Those are two different things. So you have to sort of have enough of an idea to get going and get some traction. So you want to really begin to think about what parts of your design, and maybe you only have some parts at this point, and that's okay, but you'll want to try those out. And if you have multiple things to think about, again, I return to the question before, what's risky, what's interesting? Start with those. So the other questions are things like, how much of your idea do you need to share in order to get that feedback? So prototype only what you need to get that feedback, because you don't want to get too attached to it. You don't want to spend a lot of time on something that might change. Think of this as a draft, which will get refined over time. And maybe you just need to do the introduction paragraph of that draft, right? Maybe you just need to do one part, as Glenda was saying, the role play in her example. So think about the part you really want to prototype, um, and try to worry about and focus on that part. And the third thing is really just thinking about what your prototype is going to look like. You know, I think in the Exploratorium example, they're wheeling out physical things because the exhibits really are these physical interactive objects. So that makes a lot of sense. They might be unrefined versions of them, but that makes the most sense. For Glenda's, it was a role play. So she actually needed to have people role play and try out the activity to do that. Other things you might be able to try with sticky notes if you're doing sort of an interaction. So think about the format of your prototype that will allow you to sort of try it out. And there's, again, no right answer, but try to make something, and I'm going to use the word concrete. A role play isn't concrete in a physical sense, but there's probably a plan, there's probably some scripts, there's things that allow you to try that out. So make it shareable. So really, I think what this comes down to is we're thinking about this experimental phase, and throughout the process, but especially here, we are giving ourselves permission to experiment, to try things, to fail, and perhaps fail again, and iterate and receive that feedback. So remember that the prototype is this proxy. It's a stand-in. It's the vehicle that allows you to externalize those ideas that are in your head, to make them concrete, so you can get feedback to make them even better. And remember, this is a cycle that's going to iterate over time. So then you'll make another revised prototype, taking some of that feedback, and it might look a little different from your first one. Maybe it shares some qualities, but perhaps you've had to rethink that. And then you'll get feedback again, and eventually you'll get to those new ideas that perhaps you never dreamed of at the beginning of your process. So that failure, that feedback, is your friend, and you want to get cozy with it and be kind and curious with yourself.